You fell. That moment when your knees hit the ground, when your plans unraveled, when your voice cracked from crying out in silence. Yes, that moment was real, and yet it was not final. Because falling is not conclusion, it's merely a part of the journey. In the narratives of life, whether ancient or modern, whether sacred or secular, every path worth walking contains a stumble. You cannot truly walk a path of purpose unless you've learned to rise after falling. The very act of falling reminds you that you're moving. You weren't idle. You weren't standing still. The fall implies motion, implies a risk taken, implies that you dared to step outside the comfort of stillness. And for that, the fall is not your shame. It is your evidence of courage. When you fell, you may have believed that it was the end of your story. But stories don't end with failure. They pivot because of it. A fall doesn't mean you were disqualified from purpose. It means you've been enrolled in a higher classroom of experience. No one who ever did anything meaningful escaped the curriculum of failure. The greatest leaders, the most impactful voices, the holiest people. You will find scars behind their wisdom. Those scars did not appear from standing tall. They came from hitting the ground and then refusing to stay there. There is something about falling that rewires you. It shakes your illusions. It exposes the weak foundations you once stood upon. It purifies your motives. When you're on the ground, stripped of pretense, that's when you meet the truth. Not only about yourself, but about the one who watches over you. And what do you find there? You find that even in your collapse, you are not abandoned. You are seen, you are held, and you are still being called forward. Falling is not defeat. It is the invitation to a deeper level of transformation. It teaches you resilience. It teaches you humility. It teaches you grace. Not just the kind you receive, but the kind you begin to give others who fall too. Without the fall, you may have walked with pride, but now you rise with perspective. And that in itself is priceless. That is why the fall is not your enemy. It is your mentor. It does not define you, but it refines you. So when you fall, don't waste it. Don't write your obituary at the sight of your stumble. Instead, see it for what it is. A mile marker in your journey, not a tombstone. The journey includes the fall, but the story moves on. You are made to get back up, stronger, wiser, more aware of the strength that does not come from you, but flows through you. Because falling is not the end. It's the beginning of the rising. When you hear the phrase, you fell down, but that's not your density. Something deeper is being said beyond clever wordplay. There's a misunderstanding many people carry. When they fall, they feel as though they've been pulled into something heavy, immovable, and unchangeable. That heaviness, that emotional and spiritual gravity pressing on your chest often feels like a sentence. You think, this is what I deserve, or this is who I've become. That feeling is what we're calling density. The false belief that your fall is permanent, that it defines you, and that its weight is now part of your identity. But this is a deception. It's not your density. It's not your fixed state, your substance, or your conclusion. It may feel like you've been swallowed by a heaviness too thick to escape, but even that is a lie. The fall might have felt like a collapse into despair, into guilt, into failure, but that isn't the truth of who you are. Your actual direction and purpose is not found in the weight of failure, but in the will to rise from it. Density speaks of mass and weight, destiny speaks of movement and calling. One tries to hold you down. The other calls you forward. When you confuse density for destiny, you stop moving. You believe the weight is the new reality, and you surrender to the gravity of defeat. That confusion is paralyzing. It leads people to give up too soon, to settle into identities they were never meant to wear. They say, this is who I am now. When in truth, it's only a place they've passed through. Destiny isn't found in the moment you fell. It's discovered in the moments you rise, again and again, despite the fall. The irony is that the same moment you thought would destroy you is the very ground where your destiny can begin to awaken. Why? Because the fall disrupts the illusions. It humbles the heart. It opens the soul to hear what it couldn't hear while walking confidently. Destiny often begins when ego is stripped, when pride is broken, and when the heart becomes willing to be taught, redirected, and refined. You are not the density of your worst day. You are not the heaviness of your broken choice. You are not the mass of your grief or guilt. These things may feel thick and inescapable, but they are passing. They are clouds, not chains. And your destiny, it's not defined by the fall, but by what lies beyond it. It's where you're going, not where you stumbled. It's what you were created for before the fall ever happened. So no, the weight you feel is not your destiny. It's not your identity. It's a moment, not a sentence. Don't let a temporary heaviness make you forget the eternal truth. You were made for more, and your destiny still calls. Lighter, higher, forward. Just because you're in a low place right now doesn't mean you've reached your end. It doesn't mean you've been disqualified, disowned, or forgotten. We often mistake the wilderness for the graveyard, assuming that because we've been stripped of comfort, clarity, or control, that we've also been stripped of purpose. But that's a lie. The wilderness is not the place where you die. It's the place where you are refined. It's where strength is forged, vision is corrected, and pride is burned away. The wilderness is not the curse. It's the classroom. When you fall and find yourself isolated, uncertain, or even ashamed, the enemy will whisper that this is your punishment. That this dry, lonely place is where you belong now. But nothing could be further from the truth. The wilderness is part of the process. Before every great breakthrough in history, there was a season of silence. Before the promised land, there was the desert. Before the crown, there was the cave. Before the resurrection, there was the tomb. That's the divine pattern. Down before up, silence before the shout, testing before triumph. It's in the wilderness that masks fall away. You're not surrounded by applause or recognition. You're not leaning on reputation or approval. You're left with yourself, with your questions, and with the voice that speaks when all others fall silent. That voice doesn't shout, it whispers. And it often only becomes clear when the noise of the world has faded. The wilderness clears space for that whisper. It's not punishment, it's preparation. You see, if the wilderness were a grave, it would hold no future. But the truth is, some of the greatest chapters in life begin with the emptiest pages. The wilderness doesn't say, you're done. It says, you're being reshaped. The same fire that burns purifies. The same desert that tests also trains. It's in that very place of emptiness that vision is sharpened and destiny becomes visible. Not because the terrain is easy, but because it forces you to look beyond what you can see. Do not make the mistake of calling a season of silence your sentence. Don't let a time of stillness convince you that you're stuck. You may feel alone, but the wilderness is crowded with the footprints of every great leader who's ever walked the earth. You're not the first to fall. You're not the first to question. And you will not be the first to rise stronger than before. So don't build your identity around a dry season. Don't call yourself broken because you're being refined. And don't assume your fall has buried you. The wilderness isn't your grave. It's your proving ground. You're not being left behind. You're being made ready. What feels like isolation may, in truth, be incubation. Something powerful is growing in the silence. And when the time is right, you'll rise. Not despite the wilderness, but because of it. There is a pattern older than history, etched into the very fabric of creation. The pattern of rising after the fall. This truth is not poetic optimism, it's the rhythm of the universe. From the opening chapters of time itself, the story has repeating down, then up, brokenness, then healing, darkness, then light. It is not a random cycle. It is a divine design. You see it in the lives of individuals, in the destiny of nations, in the arc of sacred history. And now it's your turn to walk through it. Not as a victim, but as a participant in something far greater than your pain. Consider the ancient stories. Joseph fell, betrayed by blood, sold into slavery, thrown into a pit. His fall was unjust, yet his response was faithful. And from the pit he rose, not only to power, but to purpose. His fall did not end his story, it began his calling. David fell too, not into misfortune, but into moral failure. And yet, through his repentance, he became not just a king, but a man after God's own heart. The fall didn't erase the promise. It refined it. These are not mere religious tales. They are mirrors. They reflect what is possible when a soul chooses not to stay down. The pattern of falling and rising is not locked in the past. It is meant for you. Your story is not exempt from the rhythm. You have fallen, yes, but that is only part one. What follows next is not up to fate. It's up to your faith. Falling feels final because it shakes what you thought was firm. It tears through illusions of control, of competence, of self-sufficiency. But that shaking is necessary, because sometimes what we built wasn't strong enough to hold our calling. Sometimes we must fall so the fall structures can crumble and the real foundation can be laid. When you fall, it feels like loss. But heaven sees it as excavation, digging deep so something stronger can be built. Rising doesn't begin with movement. It begins with vision, with seeing beyond where you are, with daring to believe that the story isn't over. And then it moves into decision, choosing to stand even if your knees tremble, choosing to speak even when your voice shakes, choosing to try again though the memory of the fall is still fresh. Rising is not loud. It is quiet, internal, persistent. And once it begins, nothing can stop it, except your refusal to believe it's possible. Do not let the fall define your future. Let it awaken your true identity. The pattern is clear, and you are not the exception. You are made to rise, not because you are strong, but because the design itself is pulling you upward. The fall humbled you, but it did not end you. The ground where you lay is not the end of the road. It's the platform for your elevation. You are not finished. You are just beginning the next chapter, the chapter where you rise. When you fall, it feels like everything stops. Your momentum, your clarity, your hope. But in that moment of stillness, heaven is not silent. Heaven is watching. Heaven is weighing not the fall itself, but what you choose to do next. The ground beneath you may be cold, hard, and unforgiving, but it is not the judge of your worth. What defines you is not the stumble, but your response to it. What matters is not how hard you hit the ground, but how you choose to rise from it. Because heaven doesn't count how many times you fall. It watches how you respond to the fall. The world teaches you to run from failure, to hide your weaknesses, to pretend the stumble never happened. But heaven sees it differently. It's not the fall that disqualifies you, it's the surrender to despair that keeps you from rising. When you fall, you're given a rare window to demonstrate something far greater than perfection. You're given the chance to demonstrate perseverance, humility, and resilience. These qualities cannot be learned from standing tall all the time. They are forged in the dust, born in the places where pride has shattered and ego has gone silent. What you do after the fall is a revelation. It reveals your character, your priorities, and most of all, your belief. Your belief in something beyond the present pain. If you believe the fall is the end, then you will stay down. But if you believe the fall is the middle, the turning point, the point of divine redirection, then you will rise with renewed strength. The fall isn't the failure, it's the furnace. It burns away what cannot last and reveals what must remain. You have a choosing to curse the ground or to rise from it. Some curse it, staying bitter, blaming others, or burying themselves in shame. But those who rise, they do something different. They honor the lesson. They take responsibility. They look upward and forward, not inward and backward. They realize that falling didn't remove their value, it revealed it. It exposed where they were weak, yes, but also showed that even in weakness, there's still fight left. Your destiny is not held back by a fall. It's clarified by it. When you respond with truth, humility, and faith, you align yourself with a higher calling. That calling doesn't require perfection. It requires surrender, not to defeat, but to the process of becoming who you are truly made to be. What heaven is watching for isn't a flawless performance, but a willing heart. A heart that refuses to stay buried in failure. A heart that trusts that grace still works. That purpose still calls, and that tomorrow still holds promise. So don't underestimate the power of your response. The fall may have seemed like the loudest moment of your life, but what you do next speaks even louder. Rise, not to prove something to others, but to prove to yourself that your story isn't over, because heaven has already decided. It's not the fall that defines you. It's the rise that follows. You are not called to remain in your lowest moment. That season of failure, pain, or confusion, it's not your permanent address. It's a place you pass through, not a place you were meant to stay. Your calling was never rooted in the place of your collapse. Your purpose was not designed to exist under the weight of your guilt, your grief, or your mistakes. Your calling transcends your crisis. It rises above the brokenness. It speaks louder than the lies that try to anchor you to your fall. You must understand this: your fall did not cancel your calling. It revealed your need for it. Crisis has a way of blinding us. It shrinks our vision, making the present pain feel like the entire story. It convinces us that because we're wounded, we're worthless. That because we're uncertain, we're unqualified. But that's not how purpose works. Your calling was spoken over you long before the crisis ever arrived. It was crafted in eternity, not in reaction to your failures, but in anticipation of what you would become through them. The crisis may have shaken you, but it did not erase the assignment placed over your life. If anything, the crisis is where your calling becomes clearer. When everything falls apart, what truly matters begins to rise to the surface. Crisis strips away what is unnecessary, what is temporary, and what is false. It leaves you face to face with the core of who you are. It forces you to ask, why am I here? What was I made for? And in those questions, a deeper understanding begins to form. Your calling doesn't ignore your pain. It grows through it. It doesn't require you to have it all together. It requires you to keep going even when you don't. There's a difference between a wound and a death. You may be wounded, but you are still breathing. You may feel lost, but you're still moving. That means there is still purpose unfolding. The crisis didn't disqualify you. It prepared you. It humbled you, taught you compassion, showed you your limits, and, most importantly, reminded you of your dependence on something greater than yourself. Those are not disqualifications. They are qualifications for the next season. Your purpose is not built on perfection. It's built on persistence. It's about answering the call even with a limp. It's about showing up even when your hands are still shaking from what you've just survived. You don't have to be spotless to walk in destiny. You just have to be willing. The call is still ringing. Your heart still beats. That alone is proof that you're not done. You're not forgotten. You're not cast aside. So don't sit down in the ashes of your crisis. Don't build your identity on what went wrong. Stand up, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. There's more ahead of you than behind you. Your calling is still alive, and it is greater than the worst thing that's ever happened to you. You were made to rise. That truth is not rooted in motivational language. It is anchored in the very structure of creation. Everything in nature, everything in history, and everything in divine purpose testifies to this reality. Rising is in your design. Falling may be part of the journey, but rising is your destiny. You weren't created to remain in the dust. You were not formed to dwell in defeat. You were shaped with the capacity to break through, to stand again, to grow stronger with each fall, not despite it, but because of it. Look around you. Morning always follows night. Spring always follows winter. The tide that falls always rises again. There is a built-in rhythm to life that reflects a greater truth. Darkness, pain, failure, and brokenness are never the final word. They are part of the process, but they are never the conclusion. Even in the bleakest seasons, something unseen is happening beneath the surface. In silence, roots grow. In pain, character is built. In stillness, direction is born. You are not stuck, you are in transition. Rising is not always a dramatic moment. Sometimes it begins with a whisper inside. Decision to hope again, to believe again, to take one more step. That whisper may be quiet, but it carries divine power. Because every great comeback began with a simple act of defiance against despair. The enemy wants you to forget who you are. He wants you to believe that the fall is all you'll ever be. But you are not made in the image of defeat. You are made in the image of resilience, of courage, of eternal design. You don't have to rise perfectly. You just have to rise faithfully. With each attempt, no matter how small, you defy the weight that tries to keep you down. Every time you choose to forgive, to speak life, to keep going, to love again, to show up, you rise. You reclaim what the fall tried to steal. And with each step upward, you become stronger, wiser, and more anchored in who you were truly meant to be. Rising doesn't mean you'll never fall again. It means that falling loses its power to define you. It means the narrative shifts from victim to overcomer, from broken to rebuilt, from ashamed to restored. This is not just about you standing again physically. It's about your spirit rising above the voices that tell you're finished. It's about your mind rising above the fog of hopelessness. It's about your heart rising above bitterness and choosing healing instead. You were made to rise. Not just once, but over and over again. Because the story of your life is not one of constant perfection, but of continual resurrection. The power that raised beauty from ashes, hope from ruins, and light from darkness, that same power is at work in you. So rise, not because it's easy, not because you feel ready, but because it's what you were created to do.